6 o'clock. We will start our planning and zoning meeting. Can we begin with the roll?
Yes, sir. Ishmael Harris.
Here.
Judah Ross.
Here.
Patrice Parsons. Here. Ashley Henson.
Here.
Christy Koch.
Here.
David Barrow.
Here.
Gary Moss.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we have citizen comments.
We have no citizen comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. On to item 3A, items for individual consideration. Item 3A, consider action to approve meeting minutes from the June 29, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor? Oh, no.
Aye.
Aye.
Right. All right, let it show that we voted unanimous. All right, item 3B, consider action to approve meeting minutes from June 29, 2023 Impact Advisory Committee meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Let it show we have a unanimous decision. On to item 3C, consider action to approve the River Terrace replat previously platted as River Terrace Lot 1-37 located west of Wilson Street, north of Magnolia and south of Mesquite Street within the city of Bastrop, Texas, as shown in Exhibit A. Doug?
Yes, sir. All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Glad to see you all tonight. We are here for the River Terrace replat. So what it was originally a subdivision that was built platted in the 80s. It was 37 lots at that time. Ended up not going forward with that development, and then the new group came in, bought it, replatted it. It's now a subdivision of 59 single-family homes, and there's about 5 lots that are going to be dedicated to drainage, some open space, parks, and then one for a lift station. So total, the site is about 11 acres, just a hair over that. The existing use is, like I said, it's vacant, undeveloped land. It's currently zoned as P3, which is neighborhood, and it's on our north end character district. Future-wise, single-family residence, so everything matches there, fits like it should. So as far as utilities, I guess. So here's the location of it. It is west of Wilson Street, north of Magnolia, and then south of a future Mesquite Street. So, that's
This is the current plat
yes.
that we're seeing here?
Well, so that was the one from the 80s.
Right, okay.
The new one is a bit different, yeah. So we'll get to that layout here in a minute. But that's just the general location of where it's located, so you can kind of get a sense of it. It's on the far north end of Wilson Street. Utility-wise, the water main comes off of Mesquite Street up there. They're able to tap into that. The overhead electric runs north and south on Wilson, and then the wastewater tap is at the south end of their development, and are able to tap into that too. So all the utilities are there, existing, and able to be hooked into. As far as drainage goes, the overall flow for the lot goes towards the west, and then west of their development is basically undeveloped land, and then runs into the river eventually. So shouldn't have any drainage issues going to the west. And I'll show you here momentarily. On the west side of the development is the drainage depression that's out there, which I'll just. Oops. And I guess, yeah. So you can see it here. It shows up in the blue lines on the, I guess, northwest corner there. And what you're seeing in the blue is in the floodplain. So there's it's going to be a floodplain easement there. The way that we're going to be able to build on those particular lots that are affected by it is getting the base flood elevation up to the correct standard, and then 2 feet above that is where we're going to, in order for those guys to be able to develop those lots.
So are you saying that they're going to be elevated?
Yeah,
Okay.
so lots 60, 59, 58, 57, 56, and depending, 55 most likely, due to the half of it being in there, so. Yep, so be elevated to the base flood elevation, and 2 feet above that to make sure that they are not prone to flooding for the 100-year flood is where that's at. There are going to be 4 new streets that are built. As you can see, in the actual subdivision, you'll have Simpson. Below that is Shehu, and then the one below that, east and west, is Chesser. The one that runs north and south is called Lindauer, and that will eventually hook into Mesquite once we get Mesquite Street developed. We're working through some right-of-way issues there and kind of some other developments in that area in order to finish out Mesquite. So definitely on the radar, but not included in this particular project. Yeah, outside of that, I think really I guess our recommendation here is to go ahead and approve this particular subdivision. Everything that we have reviewed all matches our standards, what we need. And one thing I didn't mention is for the street design, what's going to be built in there is the neighborhood. Well, it matches the B3 standards for cross sections, so it's going to be neighborhood design B is what it will be. So that's the type of streets that will be put in there. So it matches what our current standards are for that too. So yeah, as far as the city is concerned, we would like to recommend approving this plat. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Where's the parking?
Well, I think there's probably going to be street parking, and then we do have the developers and builders here if they would like to further expand on that. What was the question? The parking?
Where's the parking for all these tiny homes?
Are there going to be?
They'll have driveways? Yes. Okay, so in the front of the home?
They're all single family homes. So yeah, out front, street.
Well, am I wrong in that the B3 code says parking will be in the back and not the front?
Yeah. Oh.
No, you're not wrong. But you also approved an amendment to the code that allows what's going to be built to look like the built environment around it, and everything around it has parking in the front.
Okay, we've already approved that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
I have a few questions. So in reality, this is just a 22 house increase from what was already approved back in the 80s?
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Correct.
Why was that previous development never seen through? Did the city put up obstacles, or was there an environmental concern that allowed that 1980s development not to happen?
So, excuse me, it was platted in the 80s without any infrastructure. So, unlike today where we have a requirement for you to either post the fiscal for the infrastructure or build it, they didn't do that in the 80s. So they platted the lots, and they've sold multiple times over the years, but no one ever wanted to pay the cost of extending the water or sewer until now when you can get more lots, and it makes it feasible. So the ability to have more lots made it feasible to extend the water and sewer. So that's why. It was too expensive.
For sure. But just to be clear, we have no environmental concerns about
No.
having more houses or anything?
Nope, no concerns.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, I have one more question. Where Are there any trees or, anything planned for landscaping? It looks like the houses sit right up next to the sidewalks.
There are trees in the cross-section, the road cross-section, there are street trees. And then, of course, whoever wants to landscape their lawn certainly
One more time,
can.
say that again, I
I
didn't
said
hear.
there'll be street tree requirement in the cross-section of the roads, so there'll be trees along the roadway, which is required, and then we don't dictate what happens on the lot. So you can have roses or have nothing.
Okay.
Xeriscape, it's up to you.
I have a question. We've been talking a lot about like the responsibility for the city around street development and the costs associated. What is the plan for that, for this development? Or is the city absorbing the cost of these 4 or 5 new streets?
So the developer will build those, and then hopefully the taxable value of the homes will pay to maintain it for forever. That's the goal, right? So they'll continue to build the roads, add new houses, and at some point, they'll just become part of the city's maintenance plan, right? And that's the goal.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question also. I know we talked about the drainage plan, right? And, I mean, we obviously know a lot of things can happen. That creek is what runs through here. Are we looking at doing anything to that bridge right behind the new Piney subdivision? Because I know once, my thoughts are,
the low
right?
water crossing?
Yeah, the low water crossing there. I know that's going to have some impact on it, right? So
what they're required to do is do a downstream study, and I think that's what happened particularly in here, to show that the water could discharge at a rate that wouldn't impact everybody downstream as it gets wider and wider, and so on and so forth. The road is a little bit different issue. It's built to go underwater, right? But we may want to, they're at Riverwood. If anybody's been to Riverwood, it closes when the creek gets about 13 feet, or the river gets 13 feet at backwater, and then we end up closing the road. And that's kind of a county/city meeting point, right? And so we maintain really the low water crossing, just because we always have. But I think the improvements that happened at the railroad recently, if you'll remember when in 2016,
Right.
there was a pretty good flood there, and it actually damaged the railroad trestle. They fixed that, which allows more water to go through. So they built it to the new current drainage standards, which should be helpful. But there are no plans with this project associated to fix Riverwood, but to answer your question.
all right, thank you.
I'd like to point out something that people may not be aware of. On this street, Mesquite is going over to Carter, right? That's going to allow the people that live in KB Homes area over there to be able to get back out to 95 a lot quicker. Things like that. It's a big plus.
Yeah, Mesquite is actually the extension of Mesquite at some point will be, it's in the master transportation plan update. It's part of our capital improvement plan for the transportation impact fees. I'm not sure exactly when that'll be built, but hopefully within the next 10 years or so. And you're right, it's actually supposed to cross all the way and bring you back to 969 at some point. So, in the future.
I have one more stupid question.
It's not a stupid question. What is it?
I'm assuming this little squiggly line in the blue is a sidewalk? Is a pedestrian path? Or is that drainage?
Let me pull up the picture and you point out the squiggly line, I'll tell you. Are we talking here?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the actual floodplain.
okay.
They're required to show that on the plat, and that's what Doug was mentioning earlier, is these will have to be brought above the base flood, 2 feet above the base flood elevation in order to build. And, yeah, that's just the floodplain.
Troy, she's looking at the slide on page 14.
Look at this other one.
It's the keep going forward, keep going, other way.
I'm going the wrong way?
It's not on there, I guess. No, it's not.
Well, I've got the packet on.
So, it'll be, yeah, it's page 14,
Okay.
and it does say pedestrian.
Where do you see this?
Yes. So you're absolutely correct. At some point, you
Got
would
it.
take, yes.
Blind too.
At some point, that would be a trail that
Okay.
connects, because it's floodplain, And there's a requirement technically to build a road there. We said, you don't need to build the road, just have some kind of connectivity. So yeah, there'd be a walking trail from Mesquite to bring you back to Carter, right? And then you'll go from Carter and you could connect into that park at the KB home site. So it's meant to connect those two neighborhoods with a trail. Yes, that is a walking trail.
One more question.
Sure.
I could be wrong about this, but the B3 code, doesn't it require homes to face the street? So the homes that would be backing up to whatever street that is, what street is that? Mesquite. Does that work with our current B3 plan?
Yeah, so they're actually facing whatever the name of the new street is. You can
Street
pick
A?
your frontage. Yeah, Simpson, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, thank you.
sure.
I appreciate the presentation, and it certainly seems to be a good use, and I know downtown needs more affordability and more development. So I would put forth a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can you call roll?
Judah Ross,
Yes?
Gary Moss,
Yes.
Ishmael Harris,
Yes.
Patrice Parsons,
Yes,
Ashley Henson,
Yes.
Christy Koch, David Barrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. On to item 3D. Consider action to approve the EDC Industrial Park replat to include a regional lift station, force main, and wastewater main, being 67.67 acres out of the Bastrop Business and Industrial Park Phase 1, Lot Reserve D, replats of Lot 1 and 2, located south of Highway 71 and east of Colorado Bend within the city of Bastrop, Texas, as shown in Exhibit A. Trey?
Thank you, Commissioners. Good to be back. Yeah, this is what we workshopped at the last meeting. If you'll recall, that was originally a 98-acre tract. 25 or so was sold off to Mocha Ventures. This is part of the EDC's, one of their economic development projects. And with that's an extension of some roadways through here, and then the replat of the entire park. The city is under contract with Doucette Engineering to design. They're actually under design. Let me just get to the infrastructure. So this is a location map. I think we're all familiar with the business park and where it's at. But this is the actual infrastructure layout that you'll see at full build out. And what we're talking about is all the land around here, right, for the replat. But just to give you a note of what's happening first, when you read the staff report, it talks about minimal drainage impact. And that's because this section is going to be built first. This small little T, that's actually been, or small little L, sorry, has actually been posted for bid already. We found a few issues, pulled it, but we're resubmitting, hopefully to have that built in the next 4 to 6 months. That will then, in that triangle piece, start a site development plan, if this is approved tonight, of a rather large Mocha Ventures. They're going to bring in 500 jobs, that kind of thing. More of a call center for credit cards, stuff like that. And then the remainder of the plat, as we talk about, is what you'll see is, and this was actually approved about 12 to 14 months ago in the zoning concept scheme, and that was an extension of these roadways and the extension of Technology Drive here, and then, of course, another extension of South Jackson Street. What that'll do for this area is actually allow quite a bit of connectivity off of what is affectionately called Tahitian Village or Pine Forest Unit 3. This area here, of course, Pine Forest Unit 6 over here. It'll really allow for a whole lot more cross connectivity, which is really missing from this area. There's approximately 3,500 to 4,000 cars a day that go down Lover's Lane, and I think this is going to help relieve a lot of that and bring you straight to an intersection that functions really highly, right, at the quick stop, right, the quick something, quick trip, that's right. So that's a high-function intersection. What we'd like to do is take a lot of traffic off that intersection at Lover's Lane and put it over here. So that's kind of the goal. It's part of an economic development package All this work that you see here today, while we're only talking about the replat of the business park, is all part of what I call like a small area plan. And because it's going to include improvements for the studio and things of that nature, right? The new movie studio. So with that being said, I'll pull up the plat. What I would suggest here is since we know the infrastructure is going to be built, we're holding the fiscal on that. We have the contract underway. Our engineers have signed off on the drainage. We're ready for approval. I only have one outstanding comment, and I've sworn to the fire chief that I would work this out, and that is this road extends a little past 150 feet. And so if I were recommending your approval tonight, it would be with the caveat that if this road never goes through, that we add a turnaround of some sort for a fire truck to make sure that we have a hammerhead or something on that lot. That's the only, you have to, agreed, you have to, but I didn't want to not mention it. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Just briefly, if there's not going to be enough land disturbance, I mean, why and how with a commercial development would there not be enough land disturbance to warrant a drainage plan?
I noticed that in the staff report, and so there's not enough land disturbance when you do this small piece. For the remainder, there's a drainage plan that's underway and being approved. There'll be ponds added. There'll be a lot of drainage infrastructure related to this remainder of the park.
And that's the section that says currently being master planned? So there
Yes.
will be a drainage plan
There is already a
associated
drainage
with
plan,
that,
yes, sir.
But the stuff north and west,
There is a drainage
correct.
plan for the, and I'm sorry, I saw, noticed that in the staff report, for that small L there. I'm going to try to see if I can, Financial Way, and the 300 feet of extension of South Jackson is such a minimal runoff impact that there's no drainage improvements needed at the moment. There is a plan associated with that. We know what the runoff's going to be. We know what it's going to look like. And what they're doing is some small energy dissipators at the end of the road that just slows everything and spreads it out. And then as the remainder of the park builds, yes, there is an absolute drainage plan to make sure that there's no impact. As a matter of fact, I think it will help the drainage to the people to the south. Yeah. Any more questions?
I noticed it's going through the Houston Toad environment. How does that impact anything or future development?
So the Houston Toad line is actually that small dotted line right there. And so what we will do is have to make sure that there's a permit before this work happens. But the remainder of the work stays outside of the toad habitat. But there's a small amount that will be in there, and we'll get a permit for that before it's built. I think the clearance has already been given, honestly. What else?
All right, if we don't have anything else, anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with the caveat mentioned of the turnaround.
Perfect.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Judah Ross,
Yes.
Gary Moss,
Yes.
Ishmael Harris,
Yes.
Treese Parsons,
Yes.
Ashley Henson,
Yes.
Christy Cope,
Yes.
David Barrow.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trey. All right, on to item 4, updates. Item 4A, update on short-term rentals.
Good evening, Commission. My stuff's not as exciting today. Well, let me get past. So last month, maybe 6 weeks ago, we brought you information on short-term rentals. Since that point, staff has done a scrub of everything that is in our city. We've done a comparison. We've sent that information over to the State Comptroller's Office to begin verification. Legal is working with us on an ordinance to at least begin a registration process. As we mentioned before, we have very limited purview and jurisdiction to govern short-term rentals. Very limited. We can require a registration, but we can't require a permit, and we can't treat them any different than we do our normal single-family homes. So, and a registration is really just a checkbox to make sure that they are registered with the Comptroller's Office and are paying their portion of the hot fund. Any questions?
About short-term rentals, if you'd like to,
Sure.
pays the hot tax for the state.
Your mic is off, sir.
There you go. Is that it will, you have to pay the city's hot tax in the county on a quarterly basis.
Correct.
That thing, yeah, for sure. But I was required to get a occupancy permit for short-term rental
How long ago was that?
a couple of 3-4 months ago.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
The fire chief had to come out and check everything out. We have an
Interesting.
occupancy permit for that,
Interesting.
yeah.
There are some cities around us who, I think we mentioned Fredericksburg.
Fredericksburg, I know Lago Vista has something on the decks or on the books. And
So what we're trying to do is fit within the niche. There are some reasons for the registration, i.e. public safety. I told you before, I come from hurricane country, so it was important for us to know who was in our jurisdiction during a storm. Just like here, it's important for us to know who's here during a fire or a flood or something like that. That's simply a registration and probably a sticker and nothing else. We would have liked to be able to plot them on the GIS so you know what's around you. Unfortunately, there's a lot of limitations according to our legal on what we can and can't do. We can't treat it any different than a single-family residential. So had this home never been occupied or had gone beyond a time where it had not been issued a C of O, I'd like to have an offline conversation with you. Great. Interesting.
Are you saying that legally, it seems that we can't require that, a certificate of occupancy?
No. If I don't require it for a normal home, we do require it for homes that first time. And then we may require it after perhaps a fire or something substantial has happened to the home where we have to go in and do inspections or there was a building permit involved, we may reissue a certificate of occupancy, but it is not the normal. So when you sell and you sell and you sell, it's not normal to get another certificate of occupancy. We do go out and do what I call an inspection for TCEQ. It's really the plumbing to make sure there's no cross connections and the water is safe. But that's the extent of it. We're not in your structure. We're not verifying, because I think a lot of real estate transactions might go south if we did that quite a bit. And that's not in the purview. That's not in the lane that we're allowed to do according to the code.
So it's not considered a commercial use that doesn't
No,
change
sir.
it?
We tried that. Cities tried that about
yeah, that's
7 and 8 years ago, and we got not only our hands slapped, but then it cut off at the wrist at the legislative session 2 sessions ago.
and piggybacking on that, like Celia was saying, there were kind of arguments to try to see if you could look at it as commercial, but whenever you're coming in as that renter, essentially you're stepping into the shoes of the actual property owner and have all those rights that they would. So in a sense where you're really just sleeping there and staying overnight, you wouldn't be able to consider that commercial, even though they're probably making commercial money off of it. But
Well, I appreciate you taking the steps for the registration, at least. Thank you.
Next is a future development related items. So I heard you about signs. So Colin is on vacation, but when Colin gets back, we're going to put a survey out. I did have some anecdotal conversations with staff about what we've done with signs since then. Staff said, we don't have a problem with signs, but I beg to differ, I think. So I'm going to come back and circle and at least put something out there to let businesses and residents have some kind of comment. I did have the chamber person, I hope she's listening, talk about, the bandit signs and things and how we said, no, not really. Those end up trashing the city after a certain point because they don't necessarily go away. And I noticed that there has been an abundance of the bandit signs coming up everywhere, the garage sale that will help you. So we're going to focus our code enforcement efforts on that. Monthly volume reports. I wish I could tell you that things are slowing down. We don't feel it. We do feel it, but we don't feel it. There's more of us. So, many hands make light work. But there were still 109 permits that were issued. And granted, we don't do a whole lot in a lot of those categories. But if you think about, 93 temporary construction, 93 trades permits, those are 93 permits the staff didn't have to touch except audit. So doing great. And then a variety of, these are the things that take us the longest. And we had 23 of those. So if you can imagine, we had essentially one of those, or 1.1, every single day in the month. So if you can imagine, each one of these takes a significant amount of staff effort in terms of research and finding. This isn't, we never shut the spigot off anymore. So good, bad, depends on who you ask. I think we're keeping up. We have shrunk the process to some extent, and we are working on some internal process changes. We have begun to take on the MyGov conversation, even though that is a painful conversation, and I said I wasn't ready to take that front on yet. I just can't help it. Staff's, fighting through it too. They have the same pain points. So unlike the last time when we went live with MyGov, where very limited staff had input, least of all not the staff who were actually touching it, this time the staff who were working in it will help us put those processes together. So we expect in the next 12 to 18 months to have something. We pretty much already know what the alternative program is going to be. It's something that our neighbors and surrounding jurisdictions, Bastrop County uses it, Travis County uses it. It works. I joked with the staff that the building officials of Texas boat, and so I'm going to say this again with no offense to James, our building officials in the industry aren't typically the most technologically savvy. So when I go to a boat conference and I hear the building officials say, we love this particular permit software, there's got to be something to it. It is very easy to use and it is very cheap. Similar in cost to, I shouldn't say cheap, similar in cost to MyGov, but as I told you before, bad process in, bad process out. So we're going to take our time to do that, but we've got to do the heavy lifting. There's no way around it. And we are at updates for you. I will say that we do have at the request of Commissioner Parsons, we do have a field trip planned for you at our next meeting. At least you don't have to get out of your car. But I thought we're going to plan one in the fall where it is more walkable. But I thought it was important for us to at least go and see some emerging things that are coming out, so that when you see a plat coming up, you kind of have a frame of reference of where it is. Council will probably also be joining us at that next workshop.
That's not August 8th, is it? Or
It's
that
the
week?
10th, I believe. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm out of town that week. I'm at a
Okay.
conference. Is it possible to do it another week?
Sure.
Maybe the next
We can do
week?
it another week. That's the following week is my birthday. I ain't.
Okay, week after that?
But we will
Okay,
reschedule.
thank you.
Mhm. Any other requests?
I actually have a few requests / questions. I'm out of town that week too.
Oh,
So
good.
let's
So-
definitely reschedule that field trip because I'm quite interested in going. I've been contacted by several current business owners and potential future business owners for the city of Bastrop, and they're curious about the zoning for bars. I guess it's very strict around here, and so I was wondering if we could get some clarification on that at a future
can.
meeting and a little orientation on that, on how that works out. I guess there's some timing issues with how often you can be open and requirements of food being served, et cetera. So I'd like to be educated a little bit more on that.
Sure.
And then I would also like some more information. There's been a lot of people who are in the either an ETJ or a lot of people who live on 969 that are worried about a lot of the traffic issues, building issues, environmental concerns that are happening along that. And I was wondering if the city's planning on anything, and if so, can they share any sort of information with us during a future meeting?
For sure, that's going to be that is a field trip corridor.
Yeah.
That is a field trip corridor. Mr. Musk is in that, and we are hopefully finalizing some agreements where we will be the wastewater provider. But as I have felt in other cities, once you bring a utility, Katie, bar the door.
Cool. I'm done. Thank you.
I have a request. When
Yes,
we
ma'am.
do our field trip, can we also add that subdivision out by the new water tower on 20? Because my understanding is that's a pretty good example of what a grid network looks like and the B3 code and, you know, it's.
Addleton?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. I also have another request. I'm not sure that most of the folks on the commission have experienced or experienced what would happen when we developed the B3 code. Most of us were not on the commission at that time. We're hearing a lot about what's wrong with the B3 code. I need to hear about what's right about it. You know, before we start looking at things like dismantling the grid network, I'd like to talk about why we did that. I mean, we have an award-winning plan, code, you know, it's state approved. I mean, we've got a state award, we've got a national award. It was unanimously voted on by the council, by the commissioners. I mean, the city liked it, the people in the city liked it. So before we start dismantling it, I'd like to know why we did it. Why did we pass it? There had to be reasons why we thought it was a good idea a couple of years ago. So if we could bring somebody in that was around during that time to talk about why we did it. I mean, I understand there are things about it that need to be fixed, but I don't feel comfortable dismantling it based on the history of it coming about.
I may ask the prior mayor, Connie Schrader, to come up and talk, because this was a really good conversation that I had with her shortly after my arrival. And I too am struggling to find things that are good in the B3 code. Not because they're not good, and not because they're theoretically good, and not because if I planted them in Sim City it would make a beautiful city, but because in the built environment today, it's not sustainable. And it was built with a sustainability factor, but sustainability to the city for raising property taxes, not sustainability to a resident. There's some economics behind the B3 code about if you front a public street, your property is worth more. And we can go down that path. But I really would like Mayor Schrader to give you a good history, because she was here. She was here during the moratorium. She was here during the drainage issues. So I will ask her if she will be so inclined to do that.
That'd be great. I also looked up the definition of sustainability, which is the fundamental values of sustainability include balancing social, economic, and environmental needs. Sustainability planning is all about meeting the needs of the community now, while making sure that the future needs of your community are not jeopardized. So I hate to just, again, toss out the baby with the bathwater when we're talking about, 50 years from now, 60 years from now, what is this area of Texas going to look like? I mean, what kind of air pollution are we going to be talking about? What kind of traffic are we going to be talking about? And I think that it is our responsibility to really consider those things. And it's my understanding that the grid network takes those things into account. So I just would like to, again, I would like to be educated on why we did it. I mean, there was a reason why we did it. There was a reason why everybody thought it was a good idea. So if all of that's been flushed, I'd like to know why.
I'm happy to have a sidebar, happy to have a good come to Jesus. I'm late to the party, but as I read through the code and I read through the ups and downs, you're right, everything that you listed about sustainability is absolutely correct. In our jurisdiction, we have a disproportionate number of disabled and a disproportionate number of disabled veterans. yet we don't have a transportation system. Last night at my street, one of the people was a disabled veteran who'd had a traumatic brain injury who is trying to ride his bicycle. But the streets are not safe enough for him to ride his bicycle. And so in that instance, we do have to take in what is today's population and what we are extrapolating out. Absolutely, I don't disagree. There needs to be a better connectivity and a better sidewalk system. I also shared the bill last night, $70 to $100 million. And so from a sustainability standpoint of what would bankrupt a city, that very same grid system, if not handled correctly, would bankrupt a city. And you'll hear me say all the time that planners aren't necessarily practitioners. We live in a different ethereal world of what we would like to do. I'd venture to say that if a street superintendent had participated deeply in the construction of the B3 code, there would have been some different dialogues that were had. I can sit here and tell you some of the ugly sausage making information I've learned from the very staff who are here, some of who are still in the back. But I don't, we'll have a good discussion.
Yeah,
We'll have
I
a good
just
discussion.
want us to remember that whatever it is we lay down now in terms of roads, they're going to be with us a long time.
We hope.
And if we're talking about walkability, if we're talking about bike access, I mean, those things to me make more sense with a grid network than they do with roads that don't connect. I understand that we're talking about a cost to the city, but as a taxpayer, I would prefer to have a longer-term plan rather than just take into account that we need to change everything because we don't have the money.
Well, and I would, I'm going to push back a little bit in that we didn't take into account the longer-term result of what we thought we needed. Is a grid system needed to move traffic? Maybe. Depends on what planner you ask. Is a 330 grid too small? Absolutely. Because we don't have a 330 grid today. What is that grid? What are those connectabilities? I don't think anybody disagrees that you should be able to walk and bike and not get hit by a car. I don't think anybody disagrees on that.
Well,
But every street being built to a certain category is completely not only not sustainable, but at a certain point irresponsible, because you begin to raise a rate that makes affordable housing a thing of the past.
So why don't we consider changing the distance and not doing away with the grid system?
Sure, that's
I mean,
a possibility.
Yeah, again, because to me, kind of the building block of where we start with the B3 code is the grid system. So if we do away with that, we're essentially doing away with B3 code. And until somebody convinces me that it was a bad idea, then I can't wrap my brain around why we would want to do that. So if you would be willing to
I would.
do some kind
I
of pros and
would.
cons, that would really help me understand why this is being proposed. And you have mentioned that you're not a planner.
Mm-hmm.
Is our new city planner trained as a planner?
He has a planning degree, yes.
Oh, he's a planning degree. Okay, all right. Well, if you would do that, that would be helpful to me. And if it's okay, I'd like to pass out these documents that I
Sure,
printed.
sure.
Do I do that, or do you do that, or who does it?
We just need to make sure we keep a copy for the city
I did,
secretary.
and I gave you a copy. I gave them a copy.
No, I'm talking about staff to the city secretary,
Okay.
the city secretary, because it becomes part of the public record.
Well, I can give them my copy if we don't have that. Didn't you keep one already?
Not already.
You didn't keep one? Okay.
She's passing around a document from the Journal of American Planning Association, which is new to me today, so I'm going to go through it and read it as well. And it talks about the grids.
Yeah.
And it's by a planner, and I just want you to see who funded the report.
I
That's
know.
all I'm going to say.
It's a planner.
Well, no, the foundation who funded
Yeah,
the writing.
yeah.
Just-
But I think it's a good overview on why cities are adopting this new plan, the grid network. So I'm just asking folks to take a look at it if you want to, and we can talk about it later.
Will do.
Thank
Well,
you.
coincidentally, I was just
There you go.
I think it's hard for, even for viewers to kind of hear you. I know you have a soft voice, so you got to pull it in for us.
Hello.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. Coincidentally, I was going to suggest that, like this subdivision we just looked at has the 55-foot right-of-way, and I don't think everybody understands when you say, and this is option B or whatever, what that is, and how much of that is impervious cover and how much requires city maintenance. And so on just a small note, not a massive discussion on grids and everything, I thought it might be interesting to just talk about what we have right now in terms of the streets and the width and the sidewalks and how much of that is just concrete and asphalt.
So I will say from a 50,000-foot level perspective, the seed that I want to plant about grids and concrete is, from my view, being new to the party, we had a flood. We had a flood and everybody flooded. I told you guys my old city council was out in kayaks pulling people out of their homes in Aransas Pass. You know, down south, and then everybody flooded up north. We flooded again the following year, and we flooded again with Harvey. We talked about a moratorium because we talked about needing to address drainage, and we needed to address drainage really, really, really quickly. So for my simple third-party mind, when I came in and I'm reviewing the information for the B3 code, I say, okay, we had a moratorium for development because we needed to address drainage. And we did. We addressed some segments of the Gills Branch. We addressed some standards in drainage that we strengthened. We did. But we don't have an overall master drainage plan. You still don't have an overall master drainage plan. We have a plan in draft, but you don't have an overall master drainage plan. So we go through a moratorium because we've got drainage issues. We fix some of the drainage issues, and in that time, we take the opportunity to put a new code forward. And we put this new code forward because our other code was kind of Frankensteined and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, some of that old code is copy and pasted in the B3 code. So we still have a Frankenstein baby. But from the premise of we flooded and we need to address drainage and we got to put in a moratorium, and now we have a new code, and this new code allows new streets, and this code allows greater impervious cover, and this code allows greater drainage issues, and this code allows et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This code doesn't require parking standards. So for the commercial, you don't need a sea of parking. And for the residential, you can park in the front. But when you go look at that house on Barbara Way that has to put that parking in the back, and that's a sea of concrete in the back to get to your house, and you can say, well, they can put crushed granite, they can do this, they can do that. Crushed granite still has an impact to your drainage system. So from my simplistic view, not just the maintenance of those streets long-term is, we had a drainage problem, we tried to solve it, we put in some stronger drainage standards, we passed a new code. That new code allows greater densities. Those greater densities equal greater runoff. That greater runoff should be dealt with in a drainage master plan. We don't have a final drainage master plan. We're kind of working toward a drainage master plan, but we don't have one yet.
Well, maybe that's what we need to be working on.
We are.
Rather than,
We are. We have a draft drainage master plan that has a $100 million bill to it.
Well, I'm just saying, before we throw out the grid network, maybe we should be looking at, how do we fix some of these problems rather than tossing the baby out with the bathwater?
I think it has to be a combination of both, because the amount of concrete and the amount of asphalt in the grid system has a direct correlation and impact to the drainage basins.
I got it. I just think that we need to consider every avenue before we completely toss out the B3 code.
Got it.
Okay, I just have a question, right? Just throw this out there. What are we doing to prepare our streets for this upcoming school district? Schools opening up, happening, right? Are we going to work on traffic control? Because what do we have?
In MENA or in
everywhere?
Yes.
Everywhere, right? I don't know what can be done, but are we looking at something to try to maybe alleviate, redirect, maybe, I don't know.
So in the remodel to the schools, we signed an interlocal with the school system that said you'll let us help you address some of the traffic problems. Some of those equal a traffic impact analysis on how we can allay some of that traffic. What are some other outlets to get that traffic? Is it staggering? Is it one way? Is it closing? I just know what we're doing today isn't working in a great portion of our, yeah. And we do have the transportation impact fee that you guys have been looking at that will come before you again. I think we're going to workshop it one more time before it goes to council. That only affects new development. It doesn't affect existing development. It's only new stuff, and it's really only commercial stuff. Apartments and things are considered commercial. So when we talk about development paying its own way, they've kind of been there, but not totally. There's some drainage impact fees we're going to have to come back with, the transportation impact fee, and all of these things begin to add. Add to that some burden on the tax rate, as you know, we do have to pay streets. We do have to pay that bill. We do have to pay the bills that come across to be able to just maintain what we have. And I think that's my fundamental problem is we haven't done a good job maintaining what I have today, and I want to add to it. I have a real heartburn about that. If I could show that I was doing a really good job maintaining what I have, it is only in this coming budget, this budget coming up that council's about to approve, that $800,000 is going to be regularly put into the streets. It hasn't been. It's always been a one-time if we have anything left. And a few years ago, it was only $25,000 that was put in the street budget. So we're going through a B3 code and we're talking about grids, and at that time there's only $25,000 in the street budget. Who would have said that's a good thing to do if that's what you had known? But I think there was vital pieces of information missing to paint a complete picture.
So have we reprioritized our streets that we're going to repair?
We have a pavement condition index that we did in 2022 that's green, red, and yellow. Obviously, the green have gotten less green, the yellow have gotten more into red, and the red have gotten redder. And that we do have what that bill looks like. Ancillary to that, council, last night was my first presentation, council is considering putting forth a vote that requires the voters to reallocate some of the sales tax that's currently allocated to the Economic Development Corporation and put it towards streets. That's how dire the situation is in terms of.
Yeah, no, our streets are bad. We need it. So as long as it takes to get it done, as long as it's going to take forever, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, again, I hate to continue to give pushback, but.
No, you're good.
But if we're going to consider the future, and not just do we have it in the budget this year, let's work on getting the budget fixed.
Absolutely.
And take into account what the city's going to look like in 75 years. What kind of pollution are we going to be dealing with? I mean, when you start looking at the amount of cars and connectivity and all that kind of stuff, it's my understanding that the grid system really improves that.
I'll bring you some more studies.
Okay. Well, again, I'd like to hear from Connie.
Happy to invite her. Hopefully she'll come.
I have a question. It sounds like there's definitely an opportunity for kind of level setting on historical context, but I also think it would be helpful, at least for me in particular, to see what is the roadmap in your mind, and where would you give a rating or a prioritization across the B3 codes, the transportation, the drainage, the streets, like all of that, like where
it's all
there's
equal,
a lot, right?
They all
like
equal to one.
All of it, so
yeah, they all
everything's
equal
equally
to
important.
one.
Like,
they
that's
all
not...
equal to one. I will say that the commission giving relief with the PDD has alleviated some of the oh my God, desperation of some of the projects that are coming through. So I don't have to solve the grid system tomorrow. I don't have to solve it next month. We're going to talk about those things, and I think it's important to talk about things in context. Not just context for sustainability, and it's sustainability for who? Because one of the things we do have to still consider is, as we have an aging population, are we going to force people out of their homes because they simply aren't going to be able to afford the valuation that continues? The tax rate might be frozen. Yeah, you might get an exemption. The valuations continue. And so I'm, again, coming from a child of poverty, I'm always super cognizant of even a $5 fee on the utility bill for somebody on a fixed income. And while we may not necessarily see that in our neighbors in each one of our neighborhoods, a great majority of the Bastrop population is aged, and they are on fixed income. We have a great number of veterans in our midst. And so one of the most important things for my job as a manager is to bring forward good information, good data, and a good complete picture, not a Monet, not something that looks, pretty from far away, but when we look up, it's a hot mess, but to give you a good, clear picture so that you guys make the decisions. Managers leave. We go on into different cities. You're left with the mess. I don't want to leave you a mess, but I do want to give you a really good picture of what you're working with and what we have to do for the next, 25 to 50 to 100 years.
Yeah, that's what I think, like that 30,000-foot view from your perspective of where you would prioritize the efforts. And then also just general curiosity of when are we going to be, if and when we're going to be revisiting the B3 codes. Just curious around the timing there.
So the goal was to give you guys the super hot pinch points, and I think you've worked through probably 5 of the super hot pinch points. The one that was the super hot pinch point was the non-conforming also. You guys have worked through that. We're going to begin talking about some historical preservation and conservation in the context outside of like an Iredell district. Who does want to be in that district and how should it look and who wants to feel a certain way? We can't regulate aesthetics. The legislature slapped our hand on that too. But if we do want one segment of our city to look a certain way, what's our defense for that? And moving towards some of those things, overlays, all kinds of stuff. But from a broader context, all of these pieces are married. It's a very blended family that sometimes gets along, but oftentimes doesn't. Oftentimes doesn't. And the bad thing about where we sit today is the vast majority of the need lies in the general fund. So I have to make a decision. Do I fund 2 police officers or do I fund a street? Do I fund this? Do I fund that? And I talked last night, and I talked to the council considerably and the staff about opportunity cost. It's an economic term, right? What do you give up in place of something else? Every time we give an economic incentive, what did we give up? We just finished a 380 agreement, an economic development incentive, which is what allowed us to move that $800,000 above the line into the regular budget. So every time we think about incentivizing development, which is coming anyway, it's here, we can't stop it. Mr. Musk in our periphery, we cannot stop it. Every time we incentivize something, what did I give up? And it's important for you guys to understand what you're giving up. You may make the decision as residents and pushing on the elected officials that it's okay to give that up. You just need to understand the complete picture. And that's what I think has been, it's very hard to drink from a fire hose and see all of the pieces. We're going to play Texas Hold'em with cards, really, truly. I'm going to give you a set of cards, and this one's going to be drainage, this one's going to be roads, this one's going to be this one's going to be that. And that's how we'll start kind of attacking it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're not pushing back. You're okay.
Do we have anything else?
I got one thing to say.
Yes, sir.
Let's all remember paralysis by analysis.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yes.
Because
you can talk it to death, but the staff's the one that really understand this, and all they can do is feed us the right information. I think they're doing a good job doing that. But
sure, and I don't want to
It's not-
feed you biased information.
No, I'm just
I
saying we-
really, truly don't. I don't want to feed you biased information, but I do want to feed you even the bad pieces of the sausage bit.
because it's
gross,
We can
but-
talk about it all day long. We got to move on something.
Yeah.
All right, we have anything else?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're
Thank y'all.
adjourned. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.